Welcome back to this Dark Reading Fast Chat. I'm Terry Sweeney, contributing editor to Dark Reading. And joining us again is Jill Tyson, practice leader with Mandiant Google Cloud Cyber Crisis Communications. Jill, it's great to see you again. Thanks for joining us again.
Hey, Terry, it's great to be back with you too.
Let's kind of pick up where we left off. We were talking about some of the new SEC cybersecurity disclosure rules. Can you just give us a quick summary for folks who didn't see the initial chat that we did?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do a quick refresher. I think that's a great way to start the conversation. So as you'll recall, Terry, I described the new SEC rule about cybersecurity disclosure basically in two parts as it applies to publicly traded companies. So the first part is the cyber readiness annual reporting requirement, which requires companies to report to the SEC on how they manage cyber risk, how they have oversight over cyber risk, and they also have to report on any cyber expertise within their management ranks. And that kicks in on December 15th of this year. Then the second part of the rule are going to be ongoing requirements to notify the SEC within 4 days once they determine they've had a cyber incident that is material. For most companies, that begins on December 18th of this year. For smaller companies, they'll have until next June.
You continue to mention preparedness, and I'm just noticing that, and I'm wondering if you can take it maybe a deeper cut at that.
Sure. Yeah. Terry, I'm smiling because I love talking about preparedness. The last time when we talked, I said that this rule really puts a premium on preparedness and being prepared before a cyber incident. And you'll continue to hear that theme from me today. I'm going to focus on comprehensive planning and preparedness with a particular focus on communication.
In our last chat, you were also talking about how a cyber incident is unfortunately a when, not an if. How is it then that companies should prepare for a cyber incident?
Yeah, great question. So there are three main steps to prepare. The first one, which we talked about before and we can continue to talk about today, is have an updated, comprehensive cyber incident response plan. Second is have a prepared team. And then third is to test that plan and test the team. So first on the plan, you'll recall there are really four main facets to that plan that you need to have: governance, risk, compliance, and communication. If your company already has a plan in place, great. Get it out, make sure it's updated, and then go ahead and set up an exercise or two to test it. If your company doesn't yet have a cyber incident response plan, this is a great time to start working on it before that SEC rule kicks in December. Second, for the team, successfully managing a cyber incident hinges on having a prepared response team. Now, the team should be multidisciplinary, and they'll do everything from detect the incident, assess the incident and its severity, advise management and executives, and then coordinate internal and external communications, including communications with the SEC.
So being prepared, I'm noticing, is a bit of a subjective quality, I guess. And I'm wondering from your perspective, if you have any advice or tips about how companies can make sure that they're better prepared.
Yep. So the third leg of that preparedness, again, the first being plan, the second, the team. The third one is testing that plan and testing the team. So once you've got your plan in place, you've got your cyber incident response team in place, it should be tested with a real-life cyber threat scenario that is specific to your industry. The best way to do this is to hold tabletop exercises. Normally, we would recommend one with a tech team and then one with the C-suite or the executives. And the key is to really have that actual team in the room during the tabletop exercises. That's the people who would be working the incident. And that way, everybody knows the roles, the responsibilities, and the hierarchy during an incident. It's also really helpful to have third parties like external legal counsel involved because they're very involved during a cyber incident. So part of the testing also should include steps that the company will take to determine whether a cyber incident is material. And when it's deemed material, test that inside the scenario to make sure there are solid communication channels internally, externally, and of course with the SEC.
You continue also to mention the importance of communication. How do the new SEC rules affect communication around cybersecurity incidents?
Yeah, so a lot of people are talking about the rule itself. You and I focused on it in our last chat. What it does, what it doesn't do, materiality, what are the deadlines, all that really important stuff. But one of the elements I think companies right now need to be putting more focus on in light of this rule change is making sure their incident response plan has a dedicated section for the communications plan. So in a cyber incident, communications become extra important for a couple of reasons. First, the new SEC requirement means that communications have to be consistent across all stakeholders, and specifically making sure you don't communicate less information or inconsistent information to the SEC versus stakeholders. The second, in a cyber incident, there's a potential for reputational damage and trust erosion if the communications are not managed effectively. Even if you only have limited information to share or it's early in an investigation, it's important to deliver that message confidently and in a way that meets all legal and regulatory requirements. So to most effectively address and mitigate these two issues I just pointed out, you have to have a coordinated, thoughtful cyber incident communications plan. And each incident requires a tailored approach to communication. There's some general principles and best practices that we recommend. So during a cyber incident is when the need is highest to be focused on the data and how we communicate it. In the plan, clearly designate that multidisciplinary working group that manages information flow and checks the accuracy. The communication should be strategic, targeted, and focused, with a clear understanding of who has a need to know and who the various stakeholders are. This is all really important because there are multiple work streams unfolding, often at the same time during a crisis incident. Because of these moving pieces, we really need message discipline. In other words, making sure we coordinate internally across all business units so we can communicate timely, accurately, and with consistent information. This also helps to avoid splintered communication. So the SEC rule makes that message discipline all the more important because once that notification is filed with the SEC, all communications have to be aligned with it. If there are inconsistencies between the SEC filing and any communications internally or externally, there can be very serious consequences, including in sanctions from the SEC to the business. So to summarize, a thoughtful, tested communications plan will help make sure the company can comply with the SEC and manage messaging to internal and external stakeholders. I know that's a bit of a long answer, Terry, but those are the elements that are all so important and so critical. I wanted to make sure to cover them today.
It's great stuff, Jill. It strikes me that our initial conversation was very much about the what with the new SEC rules. This really addressed more of the how. So thank you for revisiting this. Really, really helpful perspectives here. Thank you for joining us on the Dark Reading Fast Chat.
You got it. Thanks again, Carrie.
We've been talking with Jill Tyson, practice leader with Mandiant Google Cloud Cyber Crisis Communications. This has been Terry Sweeney for the Dark Reading Fast Chat. We'll see you next time.